Let's start off with your overview and the sense you're making of the movement we're seeing at the NSE right now, where all through last week it was pretty tempered movement that we noted.
I think it's in a constructive move. I think it's heading towards resistance, which is at 3383. I think a lot of the news is in the price, and third quarter results for the most part have surpassed expectations. So it looks pretty constructive from here. Safaricom looks the lead counter, and I think that's headed higher as well. It's no longer trading first at the stock exchange, signaling there's a lack of supply at these price points. And I think once we have the banking results out of the way, we should be able to move a bit higher, a bit quicker.
Well, looking at some of the major movements on Friday's session, I mean, starting off on the gainer list, Kapchorua tea traded 10% higher. We had Sasini also gaining 14.5%. Are traders now cognizant of the value that these players are offering right now, or is this merely a sign of the fact that the rains have finally come?
Very interesting question in the way you put it. I think the first thing is, tea is at 30-year highs, as are the other breakfast commodities like sugar and cocoa. And I think you've had a significant move higher. And in India, for example, we've seen tea companies now surge to P's of 20. If you look at Kenya, our P's are 3 and 4. So we got so much room to play catch up in this market. And I think finally, the agricultural sector was a very forgotten corner. But I think investors have to sit up and have to notice that it's practically a perfect storm for these tea companies. They remain very undervalued, and I think you could see some very sharp spikes higher still.
Looking at the operating environment, though, I mean, it was the lack of rain that has so far pushed prices higher, resulting in export earnings from the January to September period rising to 50.3 billion shillings. Output was down. What impact do you see the rains now having on that earnings picture moving forward?
Well, I think, it's a global story with tea, because I think we've had some shortages out of India, out of Sri Lanka, and I don't see those going away very, very quickly. And I think tea has the advantage in that it's a rather Pavlovian response. It's not like flowers. You do want a cup of tea in the morning, and you're not really bothered if there's a recession or not. You'll have your cup of tea, whereas you might not buy your flowers. So I think the prices have moved onto a higher patch, and I think it will be sustainable. And I think these tea companies are going to get the double whammy advantage, because now they'll be able to push through more production at these higher prices. But my overall view is that Kenya is very much like Saudi Arabia is to crude oil. And what we're seeing is, less supply is worth much more, because we get a much better price and a total earnings number.
On another counter, I mean, KQ rising a further 9%, investors continuing to jostle for positions there. And we spoke about this early last week, where a lot of the positive sentiment that surrounds Kenya Airways at the moment is on the back of the fuel price and where it is right now. I mean, what's your view on the counter and its ability to actually sustain this kind of interest moving forward?
I think it looks very much like it looked in the year 2005, when it rose from about 20 shillings to 140 shillings. I'm not proposing that it's going to happen again, but I think you've got something potentially similar sitting underneath the price here. Because what you had, which completely distorted the bottom line, was very expensive fuel hedges. You have a very good core business here with very sticky prices. Try flying around anywhere in Africa and work out what it's costing you to fly economy. It's really probably the most expensive flights per kilometer, and they own that franchise. So I think investors are looking through the rolling off of the hedges and thinking to themselves, we could have a really dynamic translation into the bottom line. And I think that's what's exciting people. And I think actually everything is in the price in KQ. It looks very constructive and has probably got a lot of headroom.
Well, certainly what's interesting is that this has been a counter that over the last couple of weeks has been attracting foreign interest in particular. Let's look at one of the surprises on that gainer board on Friday. Well, certainly for me, Jubilee Holdings up 5.5%. What's the investment merit there right now, Aly-Khan?
Well, I think the case for Jubilee is a very straightforward, and it's a very well-managed insurance company. They've been gaining market share because we've got a very fragmented insurance sector, so people are more keen now on being sure that they'll get paid out on a claim. than versus, you know, the amount of the sub they've got to pay. So I think you've seen a flight to quality in Jubilee. And the other advantage about Jubilee is they carry everything they own in their balance sheet at cost. They do not mark the balance sheet up and down. And therefore, there is plenty of juice in that balance sheet, which does not show year on year, but is in the balance sheet. And I think investors are picking up on that.